Right now, in the shed or garage of almost every home, sits a meticulously engineered plastic lie. If you have ever purchased a standard hose end garden sprayer or a broad stroke retail spray bottle, you have unknowingly participated in a mathematical failure. You assume your pest control efforts are failing because the insects have grown resistant, or because you lack some elusive agricultural intuition. You are wrong. You are losing the war, because 87% of the pesticide you apply is completely aerodynamically useless. This is not a rough estimate. It is a strict dictate of fluid dynamics. To understand this deception, we must observe the exact physics of a falling droplet. When you attach a commercial chemical bottle to your garden hose, the cheap plastic applicator nozzle is deliberately manufactured to expel the liquid into heavy, downward falling spheres. The moment that 1.5 milligram droplet is pressurized and leaves the nozzle, gravity claims absolute control over its trajectory. It falls in a parabolic arc, accelerating until it aggressively impacts the uppermost cuticle layer of your plant's foliage. Upon physical impact, the droplet shatters. It coats the top of the leaf in a glistening, toxic sheen. To the naked eye, this looks like total saturation. It looks like a lethal, overwhelming victory. It is a total illusion. By applying chemicals from a top-down, broad-stroke trajectory, you are actively triggering a mechanical phenomenon known in agricultural fluid dynamics as the umbrella effect. The leaves of your vegetable plants, your ornamental vines, and your fruit trees have spent millions of years evolving to shed heavy rainwater outward and downward. They form a cascading, overlapping biological shield. Their structural architecture is explicitly designed to repel overhead water. When your downward falling pesticide hits this biological canopy, the plant's waxy surface violently deflects the fluid. The result is catastrophic for your garden. This deflection creates a perfect, undisturbed microscopic dry zone directly beneath every single leaf, a bone-dry vacuum. A space completely untouched by a single molecule of your highly expensive chemical payload. This is the fatal aerodynamic blind spot. In the entomological world, an insect's survival is dictated by two things: evading direct ultraviolet solar radiation and avoiding top-down predators. Because of this rigid biological programming, the exact geographic location of their microfortress is highly predictable. The aphids, the spider mites, the whiteflies. They do not march across the sunlit, exposed tops of your foliage. They cling precisely to the underside of the leaf structure. They anchor their microscopic, translucent eggs onto the shaded, inverted vascular veins of the plant. They exist entirely within that 2-millimeter dry zone vacuum. They are literally watching the poison wash away safely above their heads. You are raining expensive neurotoxins onto a biological umbrella, while the enemy sits comfortably underneath it, completely dry and violently multiplying. The chemicals you are purchasing may be highly lethal, but lethality is utterly irrelevant without direct vector penetration. If the atomized payload does not physically breach the inverted underside of the leaf, the toxicity of the chemical is mathematically zero. Zero impact, zero eradication. You have been psychologically conditioned by retail packaging to point and shoot at the top of the canopy. You have been trained to drench the visible upward-facing leaves until the liquid runs uselessly off the edges and drains into the soil, wasting gallons of product, heavily toxifying the ground, and missing the primary target entirely. It is a fundamental, glaring flaw in the delivery mechanism, a mechanical failure so obvious and so aerodynamically consistent that it forces a very dark, very uncomfortable question. If the physics of top-down spraying are so catastrophically ineffective, why is every single retail pesticide bottle specifically engineered to be applied exactly this way? It is not a design flaw. It is a meticulously calibrated economic mechanism. The $18 billion synthetic pesticide cartel does not operate on the business model of total eradication. Eradication is a financial dead end. If you completely destroy a localized pest population on a Tuesday, you will not return to the hardware store on a Sunday. To generate quarter-over-quarter compounding revenue, the chemical conglomerate must sell you a subscription. They must trap you in a perpetual loop of low-level, highly profitable infestation. They achieve this by controlling the delivery hardware. Walk down any garden center aisle and examine the retail packaging. You will find rows of brightly colored broad-stroke spray bottles and hose end attachments. These plastic applicators cost approximately 12 to 18 cents to manufacture at scale. But their true value to the conglomerate lies in their rigid geometry. They all feature a fixed, forward-facing, unarticulated nozzle. It is physically impossible to bend this cheap plastic tip upward to achieve a precise, inverted atomization angle without violently contorting your wrist, breaking the pump seal, or spilling the toxic payload down your own arm. This geometric restriction is deliberate. By forcing you to use a forward-facing or top-down nozzle, the manufacturer mathematically guarantees that you will hit the biological umbrella and entirely miss the microfortress underneath. They are optimizing for high volumetric flow rate, not vector precision. When you attach their bottle to your garden hose, it violently floods your canopy with gallons of diluted product per minute. The aggressive sound of the water, the heavy foaming action on top of the leaves, it all provides a powerful psychological dopamine hit. It feels like overwhelming force. It feels like you are winning. But beneath the leaf, in the 2 mm dry zone, the unhatched eggs remain completely untouched. Because the cheap hardware forces the liquid to bypass them, the embryos inside continue to develop in absolute chemical safety. This is where the trap snaps shut. The eggs incubate undisturbed. In exactly 336 hours, 14 days, the next generation will hatch. They will immediately begin draining the vascular fluids from your plants. You will walk out to your garden, see the fresh damage, and you will not blame the aerodynamic failure of the 12-cent nozzle. You will blame the chemical concentration. You will assume the poison simply wore off. You go back to the store. You swipe your card. You buy another $30 bottle. You screw it onto your hose. You spray the top of the canopy. You buy. You spray. You fail. They profit. To shatter this 14-day generational reinfestation cycle, you must abandon retail toys and adopt the mechanical hardware of agricultural fluid dynamics. True eradication requires sustained pneumatic pressure and inverted vector delivery. This is why commercial agriculturalists utilize a heavy, high-capacity, 4-gallon backpack sprayer or a pressurized solo pump unit. These devices are not designed for comfort. They are designed to break the umbrella effect. A proper pneumatic sprayer generates a continuous 40 to 60 pounds per square inch of internal atmospheric pressure. More importantly, it is equipped with a rigid wand ending in a 45 to 90 degree upward articulating brass or heavy-grade poly tip. This hardware completely changes the angle of engagement. It allows the operator to slide the wand deep beneath the lowest layer of foliage, point the nozzle directly toward the sky, and release a hyperfine, pressurized mist upward into the dark canopy. The chemical conglomerates despise this hardware. It does not fit neatly on a retail end cap. It is heavy, it requires physical effort to pump, and it looks intimidating to the casual consumer. But above all, they hate it because it works. Upward pneumatic atomization delivers the payload directly into the biological dry zone, coating the undersides of the leaves and physically drowning the unhatched egg clusters. It cuts the 14-day loop at the root, but having the correct mechanical hardware is only half the battle. To understand why standard poisons fail even when applied correctly, we must zoom in infinitely closer. We must look at the exact microscopic architecture of the enemy's fortress. To comprehend the true scale of this war, you must stop looking at your garden as a collection of green plants. You must view it through the lens of a scanning electron microscope. We need to shrink down past the visible canopy, past the stems, descending directly into the 2 mm void beneath the foliage. Welcome to the microfortress. To the human eye, the underside of a leaf appears smooth, perhaps slightly pale. Under 40 times magnification, it is a brutal, jagged alien landscape. It is heavily armored. The surface is coated in an uneven layer of epicuticular wax, a naturally hydrophobic barrier designed to repel moisture and regulate gas exchange through microscopic breathing valves called stomata. Sprouting from this waxy terrain are defensive, needle-like cellular extensions known as trichomes. It is a hostile, inverted jungle, and it is exactly where the enemy builds its empire. Consider the anatomical architecture of the two most devastating micropests, the aphid and the spider mite. These are not mere bugs. They are highly efficient, rapidly replicating biological fluid extractors. Their primary weapon is a hypodermic, carbon-reinforced stylet. They navigate through the jagged trichomes, locate a primary vascular vein, and drive this microscopic needle directly into the plant's phloem tissue. They lock in. They extract. They drain the lifeblood. But their feeding mechanism is not what destroys your harvest. Their reproductive mathematics will. Because they are perfectly sheltered by the umbrella effect, they operate in absolute undisturbed silence. The ambient temperature remains stable. The UV radiation is exactly 0. This environment triggers immediate explosive oviposition. The aphid does not even need to mate. Through a biological loophole known as cyclical parthenogenesis, the females literally clone themselves, giving birth to live, already pregnant offspring. The colony expansion is geometric. To secure their legacy, they secrete a hyper-durable, lipid-based biological adhesive. They use this glue to anchor clusters of 0.2 millimeter translucent eggs directly deep into the crevices of the vascular veins. These eggs are practically invisible, but more terrifyingly, their outer casing is heavily hydrophobic. It repels water at a molecular level. The spider mite goes one step further, spinning a microscopic tensile strength silk webbing over its feeding grounds. This webbing acts as a secondary aerodynamic shield, catching any stray moisture and suspending it harmlessly away from their bodies. Now, visualize the retail chemical spray raining down from above. The synthetic neurotoxins slam into the top of the leaf. The liquid beads up. It rolls off the edges. Inches below, in the microfortress, the aphid does not even flinch. The spider mite continues to drain the phloem. The egg clusters remain perfectly dry, safely incubating their unhatched payloads. Total safety. Perfect immunity. Even if a rogue droplet of retail pesticide manages to splash upward from the soil and strike an egg, the hydrophobic casing immediately repels the liquid. The expensive synthetic poison simply slides off the lipid casing and drops into the dirt. The chemical conglomerates know this. They know their heavily marketed water-based toxins lack the physical properties to stick to these inverted, water-repelling surfaces. Pure chemical toxicity is utterly useless if it cannot physically adhere to the target's biology. To breach the microfortress, you do not need a more expensive poison. You need a thermodynamic breach. You need a fluid capable of stripping away the epicuticular wax, shattering the surface tension of the insect's exoskeleton, and mechanically smothering the respiratory system of the entire colony. You need the forgotten botanical matrix. Before the $18 billion synthetic cartel monopolized your garden shed in the 1950s, agriculturalists fought a very different war. They did not possess patented neurological disruptors. They could not simply dissolve a lab-made synthetic compound into cold municipal tap water and hope for a localized chemical burn. They had to rely on the brutal, undeniable physics of mechanical suffocation. They understood fluid dynamics. They understood vector suppression. And most importantly, they understood that poisoning a pest is a fundamentally flawed strategy compared to physically altering its environment. The transition from historical agrarian protocols to modern retail pesticides was not driven by an increase in effectiveness. It was driven by corporate patent law. You cannot patent a physical mechanical reaction. You cannot monopolize the exact physical properties of natural lipids, raw saponified oils, and botanical heat. Because the chemical conglomerates could not own the intellectual property of a mechanical suffocant, they deliberately engineered a massive cultural shift. They aggressively marketed the idea that synthetic chemical neurotoxicity was superior to physical suffocation. They sold you convenience. They sold you a lie. Modern retail pesticides are specifically engineered to be highly water-soluble. This is a brilliant economic feature masked as a consumer benefit. Water-soluble synthetic toxins mix instantly in cold water and flow effortlessly through cheap, unarticulated plastic nozzles. But this exact chemical property is their fatal flaw. Because they are completely water-soluble, they lack any meaningful structural adhesion. When a heavy morning dew settles on your garden, or a sudden, unexpected rainstorm rolls through, the synthetic chemical matrix instantly breaks down. It dilutes. It washes completely off the foliage. Your expensive poison drains uselessly into the topsoil. The microfortress remains perfectly intact. The aphids survive. The historical pre-synthetic protocol operates on the exact opposite principle. It does not rely on neurotoxicity. It relies on building a thermodynamic emulsion, a heavy, anti-hydrophobic botanical matrix that physically adheres to the leaf, ruthlessly resists precipitation, and chemically breaches the insect's biological armor. But you cannot build this matrix with the water coming out of your garden hose. The first critical failure of the modern gardener is the municipal water supply. Standard tap water is heavily treated with fluorides, chlorines, and artificial halogens designed for human sanitation. These municipal chemical additives are highly reactive. If you attempt to mix a raw botanical protocol using standard hose water, the municipal fluorides will immediately bind to the active botanical compounds, neutralizing their efficacy before the liquid ever leaves your pressurized tank. You must use pure, high-micron filtered water, or better yet, captured rainwater. This is the uncorrupted base solvent of the historical agrarian protocol. The second, and perhaps most vital, failure is thermal. You cannot mix an agrarian suffocant with cold water. Cold water causes raw lipids and natural fats to instantly coagulate, separating the active ingredients and creating useless, microscopic clumps that will violently clog the ultrafine mesh of a commercial pneumatic sprayer. To force the oils, the raw botanical powders, and the surfactants into a singular, devastating chemical weapon, you must manually manipulate the thermodynamics of the solvent. You must use lukewarm water. By elevating the thermal temperature of the water to a precise, lukewarm state, you radically increase the kinetic energy of the water molecules. You must start the process by isolating just one single cup of this thermally active water. This localized thermal acceleration physically forces the heavy, hydrophobic lipids and the dense botanical powders to dissolve, bind, and suspend uniformly before reintroducing them to the full 1-gallon matrix. This is not casual mixing. This is an engineered thermodynamic emulsion. With the upward articulating hardware secured and the thermal baseline established, the true violence can begin. It is time to assemble the payload. A precise 6-part botanical matrix designed to do exactly 3 things: strip the insects' waterproofing, flood their respiratory system, and incinerate their nervous system from the outside in. We begin with the primary surfactant. Exactly 1 tablespoon of raw, unadulterated castile soap. Do not use commercial dish detergent, which is engineered with synthetic chemical degreasers that will violently burn the cellular walls of your consumable plants. Pure castile soap is a saponified fatty acid. When introduced to our isolated cup of lukewarm water, its molecular structure undergoes a radical, aggressive alignment. The molecules feature a hydrophilic head that bonds to the water, and a hydrophobic tail that aggressively seeks out biological fats. This is the breaching charge. When this molecule impacts the hydrophobic epicuticular wax of a whitefly's exoskeleton, it violently rips the surface tension apart. The insect is instantly stripped of its biological armor. It is laid completely bare. But exposing the enemy is not enough. We must suffocate them. This requires the lipid binder. We introduce exactly 1 tablespoon of heavy vegetable or olive oil. In cold water, this oil would coagulate, separating into a useless sludge. But suspended within our lukewarm castile thermal baseline, it atomizes into millions of microscopic lipid spheres. The moment the surfactant breaches the insect's exterior wax, this viscous oil floods directly into their spiracles, the microscopic valves along their abdomen that they use to breathe. It creates an impenetrable, sticky, suffocating seal. The micropest begins to asphyxiate within seconds. Furthermore, this lipid matrix adheres directly to the inverted leaf, creating a heavy, water-resistant shell that refuses to wash away in a heavy morning dew. Now, we weaponize the payload. We introduce exactly 0.5 teaspoons of ultra-fine cayenne pepper powder. The active botanical alkaloid here is capsaicin. In human biology, it triggers localized heat receptors. In the microscopic neurology of a spider mite, it is a catastrophic incendiary. As the lipid oil floods their breathing tubes, it carries the dense capsaicin molecules directly into their internal circulatory system, violently overstimulating their neural pathways while they simultaneously suffocate. It is a brutal, dual-vector physiological collapse. This capsaicin load is so densely potent that its residual olfactory footprint across the canopy acts as a massive deterrent to secondary mammalian scavengers like raccoons, possums, and ground squirrels. Next, we must destroy the generational future. We introduce exactly 1 teaspoon of sodium bicarbonate, commonly known as baking soda, paired immediately with 1 teaspoon of dehydrated garlic powder. This is the localized pH terraforming agent. Aphid eggs rely on a very specific, slightly acidic, microscopic fungal layer on the leaf surface to properly incubate. The sodium bicarbonate violently spikes the localized pH of the leaf, completely sterilizing and wiping out this fungal layer. Simultaneously, the garlic powder releases allicin, a powerful organic sulfur compound that penetrates the now exposed translucent egg casings. Stripped of their fungal incubator and subjected to caustic sulfur, the unhatched embryos undergo rapid cellular degradation. The eggs simply collapse inward. But this destructive matrix is physically unstable. Heavy botanical powders like garlic and cayenne do not fully dissolve. They remain in strict suspension. If you transfer this concentrated emulsion into your 4-gallon pneumatic sprayer, fill it with your filtered water, and simply walk away, gravity will pull the heavy incendiary powders to the bottom of the tank within minutes. This is why the protocol demands violent, continuous, mechanical agitation. You must actively swirl, shake, and agitate the pressurized tank with every single step you take through the garden. The emulsion must remain in a state of suspended physical chaos from the moment it leaves the pressurized tank, travels up the rigid wand, and atomizes upward against the underside of the leaf. We now possess a rain-resistant, chemically devastating, aerodynamically superior botanical payload. We possess the hardware to deliver it past the umbrella effect. But deploying this weapon at the wrong time of day will turn this exact chemical violence directly against your own harvest. If you deploy this devastating botanical matrix while the sun is dominating the sky, you will destroy your own harvest. The exact physical properties that make this emulsion lethal to insects, the heavy lipid oils and the dense sodium bicarbonate, become a catastrophic liability under direct ultraviolet radiation. The oil coating on the leaves acts as a microscopic thermal amplifier. If exposed to intense, midday solar energy, the water trapped beneath the lipid layer superheats. It literally boils the vascular tissues of the plant from the outside in. You will witness aggressive foliar burning, severe leaf curling, and rapid cellular death. You must respect the chronobiological clock of the battlefield. The protocol demands strict low-light engagement. You operate only during heavy, persistent, overcast conditions, the fading light of dusk, or the absolute stillness of dawn. But the true elite execution of this protocol requires a much darker tactical window. You wait for night. Exactly 1 hour and 30 minutes after absolute darkness, the ambient temperature drops. The microscopic predators in the canopy experience a neurological shift. The aphids, spider mites, and whiteflies abandon their deepest harborage sites. Their foraging behavior escalates rapidly. They become highly mobile, highly exposed, and highly vulnerable. By strapping on a headlamp and executing your pressurized, upward atomized assault in the dead of night, you catch them entirely off guard, maximizing the suffocating impact of the matrix. But before you saturate the entire canopy, you must establish an empirical baseline. You do not blind fire this weapon. You execute a localized, 24-hour isolation test. You isolate 1 or 2 individual, low-hanging leaves on the target plant. You apply the matrix. You wait exactly 24 hours. You observe the reaction. If the leaf structure remains rigid and deeply green, the plant's biological tolerance is confirmed. You are cleared for total saturation. If you witness yellowing or chemical curling, the host is too sensitive. You must dilute the emulsion by exactly 50% and retest. Precision is everything. Once clearance is confirmed, you initiate the empirical eradication protocol. This is not a casual, spray-as-needed suggestion printed on the back of a plastic bottle. This is a rigid mathematical dosing cycle designed to utterly outpace the biological replication limit of the enemy. You execute 1 complete, upward saturating application every 72 hours. You maintain this exact rhythm for 14 consecutive days. Why 14 days? Because you are mathematically overriding their incubation cycle. Even if a heavily shielded egg cluster somehow survives the initial thermal and chemical breach, the emerging offspring will hatch directly into a freshly applied layer of lethal capsaicin and suffocating lipids. They will die before taking their first meal. If, after the first week, you still detect active insect mobility, the infestation has breached critical mass, you immediately escalate the protocol. You tighten the application window from 72 hours to a brutal 24-hour daily bombardment. You drown their reproductive capabilities in a relentless, compounding layer of botanical violence. Once their numbers collapse, you taper back to the 72-hour rhythm. There is only one variable that can interrupt this execution, and that is precipitation. While the lipid binder makes this matrix highly resistant to morning dew, a violent, heavy rainstorm will eventually strip the leaf surface. You do not wait days to recover. You wait exactly 2 to 3 hours for the foliar surfaces to dry, and you immediately reapply. The insects survive heavy rain by retreating deep into their microfortresses. When the sky clears, they emerge. You must be there waiting for them. The $18 billion synthetic pesticide industry relies entirely on your ignorance. They rely on you using their cheap, downward-facing hardware. They rely on you missing the hidden egg clusters. They rely on you fighting against the biological umbrella, trapped forever in a 14-day loop of failure and repurchase. But now, you possess the mechanics of their deception. You possess the hardware to break their aerodynamic shield. You possess the thermodynamic botanical matrix to annihilate the enemy at a cellular level. And you possess the mathematical discipline to outlast their replication cycle. Stop buying their subscription. Take back the canopy.